Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. She is back despite being rejected by the American electorate in two separate presidential contests. Hillary Clinton is looking to reestablish herself in politics. First off, she publicly blamed James Comey and the media for her defeat, thereby sending the message to loyalists that she didn't really lose at all.
I was on the way to winning until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people who were inclined to vote for me but got scared off.
Well, her countless fans in the media, including the one you saw interviewing her in that last clip, lapped this up and cheered on her return to the scene.
I found this to be perhaps the most astonishing Hillary Clinton appearance I've ever seen. It was perhaps her at her most authentic.
I think what Jim Comey did was to throw overboard Justice Department procedures because of political reasons, his own internal politics because of the hatred for Hillary Clinton within the FBI.
20% of people voted because of racism. And I think after 8 years of a black president, there was no way that this woman was going to win.
They live in an irony-free world. All that gushing, but it's not surprising if you've been following it. Remember any of these New York Times headlines from the days right before the election? On the Hillary side, here's one. Hillary Clinton sees ugliness and joy in race's closing days. And this, big names campaigning for Hillary Clinton underscore Donald Trump's isolation. Yeah, he could never win. For Trump, how about this one? Donald Trump's moments and missteps, a look back, or black voters aghast at Trump find a place of food and comfort. But wait, didn't Trump get a higher percentage of the African-American vote than Mitt Romney did? So maybe the press didn't actually know what they were talking about. Maybe they still don't. Either way, it's hard to argue they were rooting for Donald Trump to become president, and yet many Hillary fans disagree with that. Peter Dow, for example, was an advisor to Hillary's 2008 presidential campaign, and he joins us tonight. Peter, thanks a lot for coming on.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I don't doubt that the Comey announcement had an effect on the election. I thought that at the time. But the press was foursquare for Hillary Clinton from the moment Donald Trump got the nomination. They didn't hide it at all. And the emails that were leaked from John Podesta's Gmail account proved they were collaborating with the Hillary campaign. So there's not really much of an argument to make, do you think, that the press was on Trump's side?
Look, a conservative is going to say that the mainstream media was against Donald Trump, President Trump, and liberals, progressives, Democrats are going to say that they were against Hillary Clinton. The fact is there have been independent studies that were done. Harvard Shorenstein Center did one. And look, both candidates got very bad press. You know, candidate Trump got terrible press, and Hillary Clinton got very bad press. One thing that was profoundly different, though, on the email story specifically, we counted 600 days, I had a research team, 600 consecutive days of coverage that far, far outweighed any coverage of any other Trump story. So
where was that? Where was that coverage? Was that in the New York Times and the Washington Post? Oh, no, it wasn't. It was no, it wasn't. I ran one of those news organizations at the time. And it was not in the no, that's not true. Well, New York Times did not run 600 days of email stories.
Well, Gallup actually, Tucker, Gallup had an analysis that said that the only thing that voters heard when they heard Hillary Clinton's name was email. There was a word cloud where the word email was larger than every single other word. So, look, the email story dominated coverage from the very beginning. It was something that she made a mistake, and she apologized
on the right. On the right, it did, but not in the New York Times, not in the Washington Post. Instead, the New York Times wrote pieces like this. Here's a piece by Michael Barbero, 3 days before the election. Hillary Clinton at a campaign rally, and I'm quoting this now. This is like a prose poem. It's erotic in its intensity. Quote, her arms thrust skyward, one after another, in what starts to feel like a dance. There's an unfamiliar sense of abandon and joy. The rain grows heavier. Her wet clothes turn a shade darker. She cracks a wide smile. She takes in the scene around her and laughs before she finishes her sentence. I could go on, but I'm feeling creepy about it. Meanwhile, same day, I won't go on, but the headline in the Times was, thin line splits Donald Trump's politics and business. Trump is a villain, Hillary is a hero. That was a storyline in every major media organization in America. You were there.
I dispute that completely. Look, you can cherry pick stories that were positive for her
cherry picking
or negative against him. Look, at the end of the day, the overall narrative in the mainstream media, and my issue has been with the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other networks. There was analysis done of the major network coverage, the 3 nightly news coverage, 6-to-1 ratio of email coverage over her policies. So how can voters decide? Look, Donald Trump won the election. He's a legitimate president. I've always said that. This is not about having Hillary Clinton become president. This is about telling the truth of what happened.
Okay.
Let me just say this, Tucker.
I mean, these independent studies are done by political hacks posing as journalists. The Shorenstein Center. I mean, I am a journalist. I sort of know the people who work there, and you're not going to tell me, because again, I know them, that they're politically independent, because they're not. They were as horrified as Martha Raddatz was when she cried on television at Trump's victory.
Well,
these people don't like Trump. I mean, that's true.
Well, let me give you a narrative, sort of a framework that tied through everything, and a lot of people fell into this trap. I think it was the basic narrative of the race, that Donald Trump was somehow this terribly weak candidate. You know, he came down that escalator, everybody was mocking him, laughing at him. Actually, I tweeted the next day, take this guy seriously. So from the very beginning,
you were a lot smarter than most on that. I mean, you're right. I think you're absolutely right there. He was not taken seriously at first by the press. They liked him because they thought it was a sideshow, it's interesting, and he divided a pretty strong Republican field. But when it became clear that he had some remote chance of winning, I mean, they piled on. And look, the guys who covered this campaign for the New York Times, for example, we don't need to guess what they thought. They wrote it. This is right after the election. Michael Barbero, who covered this as a New York Times reporter, quote, "We had fearless journalism throughout 2016. Voters wanted what they wanted." In other words, we tried our best to keep this guy from becoming president. They voted for him anyway. Like, is it clear?
I don't want to litigate, Mike Barbero in the New York Times. But what I was going to finish my point on the coverage is that the premise was he was such a terrible candidate that if Hillary Clinton didn't win by 20 points, she's somehow a total failure and should go away and do an apology tour. The fact is, he eviscerated a field of 17 Republicans. This guy was very tough to beat. And the fact that Hillary Clinton made history, this is a country based on fairness. We celebrate the people who have had great accomplishments. Hillary Clinton was the first woman ever in American history to win the nomination. And now you have people yelling at her, go away, shut up, apologize. As far as I'm concerned, it was a contest of 2 very strong candidates. They both made mistakes. And at the end of the day, he became the president through our Constitution. He's the president based on our Constitution.
Okay, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. It grates to hear the press described as anything but what they were, which was much more in favor of Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. They are horrified by Trump. He doesn't like them either, by the way. He attacks them directly, and they take it personally. But they really wanted her to win. They may not have liked her personally. I don't think a lot of them did, but they wanted her to win. That's just true.
Look, it's what you're stating. I see it the exact opposite. As I say, that 6-to-1 study of emails over issues. I mean, there are a lot. The playing field was tilted against her unfairly. And again, this is not about relitigating. This is about just telling the truth. Hillary Clinton did not face a fair playing field, Tucker. That's just a fact.
It's so interesting. I was at the newspaper in Arkansas 25 years ago, so I've watched the Clintons carefully for a long time. Have you noticed a continuity of storyline here? Like, they always make the case. Her husband does the same. We're being treated unfairly. We're the victims of some kind of bias. People are mean to us for reasons we can't explain. Have you noticed this? They always say that.
I wasn't there, so I'm talking about this particular election that I covered very carefully. And the fact is, there were 2 candidates under investigation, but the public only thought one was. And again, as I say, 2 formidable candidates fighting one another. One ended up being president, but the playing field was not level for Hillary Clinton.
Okay, just in point of fact, I don't think we even know at this date right now that Donald Trump has been the subject of an FBI investigation, but his campaign and the people around him. Do we know something different from that?
I'm just saying what I've heard from the FBI Director Comey in his testimony and what the intelligence community has said. I don't know anything more than what I've heard publicly. But from what we've heard publicly, there was confirmation that there's an investigation. And look,
on him personally, I don't know if that's true.
I've also tweeted that I don't think it's going to take him down, as many people, I think, on the Democratic side believe.
Yeah, well, they should listen to you, Peter. Thanks a lot for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Dave Weigel is a politics reporter at The Washington Post, which implies a lot of things, including that he's likely not a fan of this show. And indeed, he is not, judging by his reaction to an interview we did on Wednesday night. Ben Smith, the editor of BuzzFeed, came on, you might remember, and we had a vigorous discussion about liberal groupthink in the press. We disagreed with each other, but I wasn't hostile. I enjoyed it, actually, and I think Smith enjoyed it, too. Weigel definitely did not enjoy it. Too many different opinions on display, including some he doesn't agree with, and that shouldn't be allowed. So like the D.C. journalist he is, Weigel immediately started whining about it on Twitter. Why does Ben Smith keep diving into this endless pool of bad faith, he tweeted. Keeping Smith in mind that Smith has been on the show exactly 2 times, and both times we asked him pretty straightforward questions and gave him time to answer those questions. That's called legitimate debate. But to a Washington Post reporter, someone who lives in a world where every single person has identical views of everything, all of them fashionable, all of them unquestioned, that looks like bad faith to him. So naturally, we invited Weigel on to come on tonight and explain himself. I emailed him this morning. He wrote back to say he couldn't do it. He was planning to watch a movie. Now, two obvious points here. First, diversity means difference. Guys like Weigel love diversity when it means people who look different, but a diversity of views, that is terrifying to them. It's a threat to the moral monopoly they believe they hold in American life. It suggests that people who aren't evil or stupid might have come to different conclusions from the ones they came to and may even have a valid point. That possibility is unacceptable to them. It shakes their faith in their own virtue. And so they bat it away with name-calling. They always do. Bad faith, fascism, basket of deplorables, whatever. You've heard it all before. They're going to keep saying it until you shut up, because, of course, that's the point of saying it in the first place. And the second point here, it takes a lot for liberals to come on this show. Thanks to people like Weigel, there's a lot of peer pressure not to come on. And they know that when they do come on, it won't be fluffy. They're going to have to answer the question. But night after night, some of them come anyway, and we are grateful for that. They may be wrong or misguided, but at least they're not cowards. Well, for 14 years, a town in Pennsylvania has featured a bench with an inspirational quote that mentioned God. But now the atheism police are on the scene and are forcing its removal. We'll talk to a representative from the American Atheists up next. Also, President Trump's executive order on sanctuary cities may have been blocked, but now Texas is taking matters into its own hands with a bill to punish sanctuary city officials. We'll talk to Texas Governor Greg Abbott about that in just a minute. Well, a city in Pennsylvania is removing a park bench with a religious quote in order to placate angry atheists. A public park in Oil City features a bench which was donated in 2003 by the local branch of the VFW. The bench bears the phrase, "Men who aren't governed by God will be governed by tyrants." Nobody seemed to be bothered by the bench until the secular lobby struck. American Atheists sent a letter demanding the removal of the bench, and the town complied, fearing the cost of litigation if they didn't. Amanda Knief is the National Legal Director of American Atheists, and she joins us tonight. Amanda, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So people who aren't governed by God will be governed by tyrants. Aren't you the tyrant in this story?
I think we are the folks that fight for equality for everyone. And when this bench was put with a veterans memorial, it was demeaning to anyone who's a non-Christian veteran.
Well, it's not just Christians who believe in God. Virtually everyone but you and the Buddhists believe in God. So why just Christians?
So about 25% of military enlistment either claim no religious preference or are atheist or agnostic.
So the idea is that the word God is offensive. Just the appearance of the word God is so offensive to those who don't believe in God.
Not the word God, but the fact that, assuming that if you're not a religious person or a Christo-Judeo person, that you're going to be governed by tyrants, dismisses the morality and the compassion that many of our veterans and our soldiers have. But just because they don't believe in God doesn't mean that they're not good people.
Nobody's suggesting that. Look, this is a park bench in a town that's down on its luck. It's lost population for almost 50 years. It's not a rich place at all. And you come in with a well-funded group and say, do what we want or we'll crush you in court. And they say...
That is not what we did.
Well, sure, that's what they say you did.
Well, if you look at the first letter we sent, first of all, we got a complaint. It wasn't like we just went looking for this.
Who was the complaint from?
It was from a resident in the city.
Who?
I'm not going to say his name. He wants to remain confidential.
So on the basis of an anonymous complaint, someone can come forward without even giving his name and just say, I don't like this.
Well, we know their name, but then what we do is we research it.
But don't the residents... Look, you don't live in Oil City.
If we had gone to litigation, he would have come forward.
They had a park bench. Okay, so one guy who doesn't even have the courage to stand up and reveal his identity gets to control the entire existence of this park bench in a city of 10,000.
Covers
the Constitution has nothing to do with this. I mean, the First Amendment prohibits...
This bench had nothing to do with veterans either.
But was the bench establishing a state religion?
I think because it was on the city park and the city had put it there and agreed to accept it, that they were saying that anyone who is a veteran but doesn't believe in God is someone who's going to be ruled by tyrants. Again, dismissing the compassion and the morality that comes from
Okay, so they said something that you don't agree with, which is okay. Lots of things that the government says I don't agree with, but this is not an establishment of a state religion. So the First Amendment doesn't...
According to the Supreme Court, when you put something like there and you don't open it up to all points of view...
No, the Supreme Court didn't say that, and that's why our currency continues to have In God We Trust on it. That's why the president members of Congress, federal judges are all sworn in.
And they shouldn't
invoking God. But I'm just saying, we live in a country where the U.S. government uses the word God all the time.
And the Supreme Court has said that that is ceremonial deism. And we still fight that. We still think it's wrong because it dismisses.
But why not pick on the currency? Why pick on this kind of down and out? No, but basically the point is you come in here and you crush the little guy.
We're not crushing a little guy.
Of course you are. What are the people who want to sit on the bench in the park?
We offered to pay for a brand new bench.
Oh, really? And what would the bench be like if you had...
We told them that if the VFW would pick out a different quote that was actually appropriate to veterans, we would pay for a brand new bench.
But you wanted to put from American Atheists on
we wanted to put somewhere on there just a little plaque that said paid for by American Atheists.
Oh, so you're putting your religion on the bench, but isn't that an insult to people who believe in God? Why are you not violating the First Amendment? You said that they can't have...
We weren't making any kind of statement about what veterans
you said American Atheists. They had the word God on there, and the word God was offensive to people who don't believe in God.
Not the word God. It was the phrasing of those who don't believe in God.
It's a very old quote.
So you're just talking about, ideas and things. If you may feel that, but you're a Christian, and people who aren't Christian look at that and don't feel the same way.
I get your point, but you're violating your own principles because you're saying you wanted to replace the bench that you claim is a representation of Christianity with a bench that has an explicit statement about atheism, which is of course its own religion.
No, we didn't want any explicit.
No, but you said you wanted donated by the American Atheists.
That just says where it's from. We wouldn't have a problem with the VFW putting it on there or somebody else saying they paid for it. The statement itself would have been...
But your name itself is a statement. I mean, look, the quote is not an endorsement of any religion.
So part of the well, that's your take on it, but we believe it is.
Okay, well, having a bench that has American Atheists on it, doesn't that make non-atheists feel demeaned? I mean, look, here's the point. This is not about making a group of people feel included. It's about crushing people.
No, it's not.
Who are of course it is.
No, it isn't.
Then why aren't you doing this, I don't know, to the federal government? I mean, the President of the United States...
There are several organizations, and we all have ongoing lawsuits about how churches get special tax treatment, about how they don't have to have transparency, about how preachers get a special deduction on their mortgages and their homes. There's all kinds of things.
What about the Declaration of Independence?
What about it?
Well, it contains the word God.
No, it doesn't. It says Creator.
Okay, that is a synonym for God.
In your mind. And so what?
No, in the minds of the people who...
It's a declaration of war. It's not our Constitution.
Okay, but it is a founding document that is part of our secular religion here in the United States. The Declaration of Independence is like central to our history.
It is.
It's something that all school children learn about, or should.
It is.
And yet, it's got God all over it.
It doesn't have God. It has Creator just a couple of times.
Come on now. Let's not let... We're adults here. God, creator, deity, it's the same thing.
Okay, but when they did our Constitution, they left God out of it.
Okay, but I'm just saying, they kept it in but do you think that the Declaration shouldn't be stored in the National Archives?
I think it has historical value, but I think we also need to recognize that the people who wrote it back in the 1700s had very different views than we do and had a very different understanding of the world. Okay. I mean,
If you saw a swing set, if there was a swing set in Oil City, Pennsylvania that had a cross on it, someone carved a cross on it, a Christian symbol, would you tell them to take it down?
No.
Why?
Because unless the city approved it or it's graffiti. No, I wouldn't. I would hope that...
Okay, what if the city had a swing set that just kind of had a cross on it?
What swing set would have a cross?
Well, I don't know. It's a Christian symbol. I mean, the point is, look, no one was being hurt.
But that's your point of view. There were people in the town, veterans, who did not like it.
Who were they?
I'm not going to give their name.
Okay, then if you won't even tell me their name, you're telling me that I need to believe there's a large group of people or any people offended by this, but you won't say who they were, and yet you took... There are a lot of people who say they liked the bench. We know their names because they're willing to stand up and say it. But on the basis of what you claim is an anonymous complaint, nobody gets the bench.
Well, the bench is actually now at the VFW site, so it's still there, and people can still visit it.
But last question, why hassle people? I mean, the bench wasn't... I mean, let's just be totally real. There are a lot... In a country where every senator swears in on the Bible, you're hassling some little town in Pennsylvania over a place people like to sit.
Not all members of Congress swear on the Bible. Many of them use the Constitution or another faith
or the
tradition.
Quran or the Torah. Okay, but religious documents. Why are you bothering these people in this little town? Why do that?
Because someone came to us, and we thought that there was a constitutional issue, and the city agreed because they removed it.
Okay. I just think it's awful that people anonymously can hurt other people without standing up and saying who they are and what they believe. I think it's awful.
The threats that we got when we did this...
Whatever. You're coming on here and saying what you think, but you're claiming that some anonymous guy, hassled this little town, and he doesn't even have the courage to say it to the face of his neighbors, and I just find that deplorable.
I'm sorry, but we have a reason why he came to us.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, yet another widely publicized hate crime has been exposed, again as a total sham. An organist at the Episcopal Church in Indiana has admitted that he spray painted his own church with a swastika, a Heil Trump, and an anti-gay slur. The organist, who's a man called George Nathaniel Stang, says he, quote, wanted to give local people a reason to fight for good, even if it was a false flag. The ends justify the means. Notably, this specific case was one of many alleged hate crimes that was used by the press to vilify and marginalize Republican voters in the last few months. The Washington Post ran this story as the lead anecdote in a piece that chronicled, quote, numerous incidents that have occurred in the wake of Trump's election. In fact, the Post mentioned this incident in a bunch of articles, but for some reason, they haven't posted a single piece about how the attack's a hoax, because they're liars. Another hate crime from the same article was this one. A Michigan student told she had to take off her hijab or she would be set on fire, immolated. Oh, wait, it turned out she made the whole thing up. It never happened. There are many, many more. That surge of threats against Jewish community centers this spring, the one we heard a lot about, those turned out to be the work of a left-wing journalist and an Israeli man. The two white men who attacked a Muslim woman at UC San Diego, remember that? They didn't exist either. These hoaxes have been happening for years, and you can pay a visit to fakehatecrimes.org for hundreds more if you want to read about them. So why do the press keep repeating variations of the same tired story without bothering to check and see if they are literally true? Maybe because a lot of reporters are incurious and lazy, but more likely because hoaxes like this suit their political agenda, so they keep repeating them. Well, this past February, we welcomed attorney and UCLA professor Keith Fink onto the show. He told us about how his school is bent on stamping out conservative beliefs wherever they see them, including in his classroom. Watch.
UCLA is a microcosm of the macrocosm. They continuously and consistently trample students' rights. They abuse the law, they twist the law, they send out these interorum emails which either chill speech that they don't like, or they actually punish students that run afoul of these types of policies that don't conform to their liberal ideology.
Have things improved since then? We like to keep up with these stories. Well, according to Professor Fink, they have not. Now he says the school is trying to fire him. Professor Fink joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on. So there's a petition signed by some of your students that says this: UCLA has taught us to fight injustice wherever it rears its ugly head. We will not sit idly by and watch a beloved professor have his teaching career discarded in a politically motivated and morally bankrupt fashion. Is your career being destroyed by UCLA?
My teaching career is being destroyed. It's being destroyed at UCLA. I've had other schools reach out to offer me teaching positions, but I'm a UCLA alumnus, and the one school I want to teach is the school where I spent my formative years. And they are doing everything they can to fire me. And let me just tick off for you what has happened since I came on your show 2 months ago. Yesterday, they held a meeting in secret, which the meeting can only be described as something akin to a modern-day Star Chamber. I was not allowed to come to the meeting to state my reasons for wanting to teach at the school and to address any questions or concerns the committee had. But worse than that, the person who did the single most important thing that goes into the committee's decision was someone who was biased. Part of the evaluation process is there has to be a faculty member sit in the class and do a review.
Right.
They asked me at the beginning of the process who was biased. I told them who was biased. And who did they choose? Somebody that was biased. Now, why did they do that? Because if you had anybody sit in my class and listen to the way I taught, of course they would conclude I was excellent and then some. Secondly, I then asked the university if those who are biased against me on the committee would follow basic notions of due process and fairness and recuse themselves from the vote yesterday. What was I told? No, UCLA does not have a policy whereby one who is who's prejudiced or biased will recuse himself. Third, those that are on the committee are unqualified. And if you can believe UCLA's own policies say when you have an important review like this, you will make sure that there's somebody qualified to do the review. There was not a single person who was a lawyer. There was not a single person with any knowledge in free speech, the First Amendment, or due process, which is the subject matter I teach.
Let me just stop you there. I've been following this case fairly closely, and at one point, it seems like the school solicited reviews of your class from kids who had not taken your class. Is that true?
Well, I don't know how, of the 8,000 students who've taken my class, I don't know how they solicited. But you're correct. When I looked in my review file, there is a review from a student that said, I don't know why you reached out to me. I don't know Professor Fink.
So is there anything, look, bottom line, you're one of a relatively small number of non-liberals on UCLA's campus. Do you have any recourse? Clearly, the people who run the place don't like you. Your politics sound like they have something to do with it. What about donors? What about the board of the school? What about political figures in the state? Is there anything you can do to keep from getting bounced because you're saying things they don't like?
Well, this is, look, they bounced me yesterday. We know this. This has been going on now for the last 2 quarters. The entire administration knows it. The board knows it. Between national news coverage, not a single person has reached out to try to speak with me. Now, what can people do? I'm really fighting this on principle. The principles I'm fighting for are very important to this country. It's free speech and due process. And so what can people do? Students are rallying in my support. Students can fight for me and fight for the principles I'm standing for. But most importantly, donors can stand up.
Well, that's
and
exactly
donors
right.
should not contribute. Well, that's exactly. Donors should not contribute to schools, and even my school, if they won't comply with basic notions of due process and fundamental fairness.
We got to go. We're out of time. The other thing we can do is defund this garbage, which the U.S. Congress pays for in large part. Professor, Godspeed. Keep us posted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Next up, a sheriff whose county borders Mexico is not a fan of the border wall. He calls it a medieval solution to a modern problem. He joins us in a minute. Napier is the sheriff of Pima County, Arizona. It borders Mexico. He's a Republican. He was elected the same night as Donald Trump. But he's not a fan of the proposed border wall. He says it's, quote, a medieval solution to a modern problem. Instead of spending money on the wall, the sheriff says the Trump administration ought to give $5 million to his department so he can improve policing on the border. Sheriff Napier joins us tonight. Sheriff, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Tucker.
So I've heard this line a bunch. You may have thought it up. This is a medieval solution to a modern problem, but it seems that it's really a medieval problem. People sweeping across your borders. Actually, the Romans dealt with it 2,000 years ago, and the solution then was a wall. And the Chinese built a wall, the English built Hadrian's Wall, the Israelis just built a wall, and they kind of work. Why wouldn't it work in Arizona?
Well, there are a good many reasons. One is cost, Tucker. I mean, for 10,000 years, mankind's been building walls around things. And one would think in 2017, with the robust array of technological options that we have, human resources, and other things, that we could come up with a better solution. I am absolutely a proponent of securing the border. My fear is that we're continuing this dialogue of a wall, which to many of us just doesn't seem credible. And in that discourse, we're losing the more serious discussions about how to better secure our border at a lower cost point, perhaps more effectively. And that's my real concern. The porous nature of our border is a national security problem. It's a public safety problem. It's a human rights problem. All manner of transnational crime threats are coming over the border. Drug trafficking, human trafficking. And about 150 people a year die in the deserts of western Pima County, where I was at a community event last night. I may be one of the only sheriffs in the United States that has an industrial refrigerator outside of one of my district stations, the only purpose for which is the storing of human remains.
I believe
people that die in the deserts.
I've been down there. I've seen it. It's awful, and I agree with everything you just said. But here's what you may not know. Nobody in Washington wants to secure the border. That's why we've never done it. Because there's a lot of political pressure. Democratic Party wants more voters. Republican Party wants cheaper workers. It's never happened. So the beauty of a wall is it's permanent, or as permanent as things get. And so why not at least try to do that? If you really think it's a cost to have illegal immigration, why not try that? Nothing else has worked.
Well, Tucker, there are many reasons. One is that there isn't even infrastructure near the ports of the border that we would want to construct a wall to transport the things in the workforce that we would need to secure a wall in a traditional sense. I would much rather that we change the discourse to looking at a wall as an analogous term of an impenetrable barrier that might be in places technology, it might be fixed barriers in other places, it might be human resources, or a blend of all of the above in other places. But there's land use things, topography. We have a Native American reservation here that transcends the international border. And there are just some real problems. There's some environmental issues also.
Right. No, I understand all that, and it would be expensive and difficult. But can you kind of see why voters like the idea of a wall? Because they don't believe you or anyone in Washington. Nobody wants to deal with the problem. They say they do, but they really don't. They really don't. They think it's racist to keep people out of the country. And so, like, they just want concrete evidence that somebody is taking this seriously. I think maybe that's what it was about.
Well, I think Tucker, I think moreover, it's an easy soundbite. It's easy to digest. When we start talking about the fact there are 380 miles of international border in my state, I'm responsible for about 125 miles of that. It's easy to talk about a wall. It's an easy soundbite to digest. When you start talking about mountains and rivers that flow from the north and tribal reservations, this is a very complex issue, and perhaps that's why we're still dealing with it.
Really? Because you know what's a pretty
Washington,
easy soundbite? What's an easy soundbite? With respect, is that this is a medieval solution to a modern problem. That maybe is the most facile of all sound bites I've heard on it. And the truth is, people don't think you take it seriously. And I'm not saying you particularly, but our elected officials don't take this seriously. Again, you sound like a totally sincere person, but nothing we've done in the past 50 years has really worked. And so what's the guarantee that your solution will be different and will work?
Well, Tucker, rather than holding the county sheriff responsible, let's hold the people in Washington, D.C. responsible. They've been kicking this can down the road for decades. This is my home, Tucker. I live with these problems every day. I've been a law enforcement officer.
But hold on, you're also asking for federal money. You're saying, we don't want to spend all this money. You have deep concerns about the federal budget, apparently. We don't want to spend all this money on the wall. I want money for my department, which is fine. But how do you know that that's going to work when it hasn't worked in the last 5 decades?
We have to have that commitment. We have to change the discourse on this and hold the people in Washington, D.C. responsible. I'm struggling to buy cars for my deputies that are responsible for patrolling 9,200 square miles of my county. So there's nowhere in this discourse is any discussion about helping border sheriffs and border communities that deal with this problem every day, because Washington, D.C. has failed us under many different administrations to address this problem.
That's true.
It's not a new problem, Tucker, and I've been living with this problem in my home for 30 years.
But by the way, it's not just Pima County, Arizona. I mean, people keep moving. The country's been totally transformed by illegal immigration, not just the border states. North Carolina, nowhere near the border, completely different state. So, I mean,
of course,
all of us have a stake in this. Anyway, Sheriff, thanks a lot for this. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tucker. I appreciate being on.
Congress keeps stonewalling President Trump's wall, and a federal judge just blocked his executive order concerning sanctuary cities. So what is next? Some states are taking immigration into their own hands. Many are. In Texas, the legislature just passed a bill allowing state government to impose big fines, even jail time, on local officials who ignore federal immigration laws. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas says he plans to sign this bill. He joins us tonight. Governor, thanks for coming on. So what does this do exactly, this law?
This ensures that we are going to ban sanctuary cities in the state of Texas and imposes civil penalties that can add up to more than $25,000 a day. It can impose jail time on officials who don't follow the law, and can lead to the removal of these public officials from their jobs, such as a sheriff like in Travis County who allowed sanctuary city policies to operate in Travis County.
Right. And all of that seems to, from an outsider's perspective, makes perfect sense. I am struck, though, by the number of local sheriffs who say they're against this. Why would they be against it?
Well, as you might imagine, a sheriff probably doesn't want to wind up in jail, which would be one reason why they would be against it. But second, if you look at the sheriffs who have come out against it, they are sheriffs in counties that are Democrat in nature. And so I think they are talking more to their electoral base as they are to what the real issue is, Tucker. What the real issue here is public safety. People need to realize the first role of government is to keep our people safe, and that means removing from the streets those who pose a danger, and that includes making sure that if the federal government wants someone detained, the state should cooperate in detaining that person.
So liberals are making the argument that basically illegal aliens have a right to live and work here. Excuse me, I choke up just thinking about it. How long before they make the argument that illegals have the right to vote here?
Well, we've heard some echoes of that already, but Tucker, let's go back to your first premise, and that is what we're talking about is not just whether or not illegal immigrants have a right to be here. What we're talking about is going after those who have an ICE detainer request on them, someone who has already committed a crime, someone who's proven themselves to be dangerous, and someone who should not be out on the streets. Remember, Tucker, there's a tragedy that led to a lot of this, and that is Kate Steinle. People are forgetting about Kate Steinle and what happened, and the reason why she was killed was because in part of the sanctuary city policies of San Francisco. As governor of Texas, I cannot allow a San Francisco Kate Stanley situation to be repeated here. No governor, no law enforcement official anywhere should allow that type of tragedy to occur.
Well, it's awful, but the reason they're allowing it to occur is because there's a political benefit to the Democratic Party, which expects all of these people will become Democratic voters sooner rather than later and turn Texas blue and end national politics. No Republican could ever get elected if Texas becomes a Democratic state. Do you acknowledge that that's the motive here, and is it working?
I believe that could be a motive behind their thought process. I disagree with their conclusion because I don't think that it will turn Texas blue or any place blue, because I know that it doesn't matter what your background is. What every voter is concerned about is their safety. And any type of act by any official, Republican or Democrat, that promotes lack of safety is going to lose their office.
Boy, I hope that's true. Governor, thanks a lot for coming on tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
One update to you tonight on the alleged rape case out of Rockville, Maryland. We did a number of shows on it. It was the one where a teenage girl reportedly was raped in a bathroom by 2 illegal immigrants who'd been placed in the school rather than being deported. After investigating the matter, prosecutors in Maryland say they're dropping rape charges against the 2 accused. They say evidence shows the encounter was consensual. The 2 still face child pornography charges, though, and deportation proceedings are still underway. There's no status update for them, but we'll be waiting for it, and we'll tell you when we learn. Read the paper lately? Everybody's gone insane. We decided to join in and rate the relative insanity out there in the news. Time for Top That, where we decide which is the craziest story of the night/week. Our panelists tonight: Gabby Morangiello, D.C. bureau chief for the New York Post, America's greatest newspaper, and Carrie Lucas of the Independent Women's Forum. Great to see you both. Gabby, you first.
All right, so if you were watching The View this morning, you saw
and of course I was.
Liberal comedian Wanda Sykes weighed in on why Republicans have chosen to dismantle Obamacare. Let's take a listen.
They're just trying to erase anything that President Obama did. I bet you they want to act like that man never existed, like it never I bet you Mitch McConnell is on the phone with David Copperfield right now. What else you got? I want to make him disappear. How can we make him disappear?
Why? Do you think that is?
It's racism.
Yeah.
That's it. They hate having a black president, and they want to get rid of it. That's what it is.
Well,
Yeah. So if you're against Obamacare, you're a bigot?
Right. It's racism, apparently. I mean, I'd like to ask her what she thinks President Trump's decision to allow DACA to continue then is, because he's obviously kept in place a number of policies and legislation from the Obama era that he had originally said he wouldn't. So if this is racism, I mean, what are those? Is that a good thing? Is she able to admit that as a liberal comedian? Or is every single thing that this administration and this Republican-controlled Congress does rooted in racism and bigotry?
Well, sure, and Obamacare was passed by an overwhelmingly white Democratic majority in the Congress. So, what does that mean? That's pretty nuts. Carrie, can you top that?
Yeah, well, let's see. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan, Tucker, but you guys may know that yesterday was a very important day for Star Wars fans, and that it was May 4th, or May the 4th be with you, and people are encouraged to go ahead and dress up as their favorite Star Wars character. So some kid in Wisconsin, Green Bay, Wisconsin, shows up in a Darth Vader outfit, and a parent sees him and instantly calls the cops. There's a lockdown not just at his school, but the next school, until the situation was, quote, resolved.
Because he had a lightsaber?
No, he didn't have a lightsaber. He was just dressed in a scare uniform. And the thing that, I just think it's a kind of sad commentary that instead of talking to the kid, asking him what he was doing, making sure that he wasn't wasn't planning to shoot up the school, that the instant reaction was to call the cops. So
the suburbs of Green Bay, which are beautiful and filled with
Sure.
nice people, pretty safe part of the country.
Yeah. So I guess the cops may have had, the good news is that the cops said that they looked into it, and there's no charges being pressed. They're recognizing it was probably just an innocent mistake. But man, you wish you could.
So it wasn't just they thought the kid was weird, but they thought he was a threat.
Yeah, they thought he was a threat. They thought this could be something going on. So it was 2 schools that locked down as a result. So
depressing. Both are pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
Yours makes me a little sadder, though. Because Wanda Sykes used to be a comedian and a really talented one, and she's gone completely off the deep end with this Trump stuff, and it's just distorted her so completely that she's become someone who's screaming at you on the subway.
Right, and she's not listening to her fans either. I mean, she was shouted down after insulting the president at a show recently.
It depresses me. So you win, you get the participation trophy. In 2017, everybody gets a trophy, especially you, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, 2 nights ago, we took you to UC Santa Cruz, where a black student group had taken over the administrative building. That standoff just ended. Who won? You can guess, but we'll verify your instincts coming up. I want to update you on a story we did yesterday, events at UC Santa Cruz. That's where a black student group took over an administrative building and refused to leave unless their demands were met. Well, after 3 days of occupation, the school has capitulated to every single demand. Of course they did. Those demands included painting the school's Black Affinity House red, black, and green, the colors of black liberation, and guaranteeing that all black students, but only black students, have the right to live there. Also, every student must now undergo diversity training whose contents will be reviewed and approved by the group that took over the building, because they run the school now. Segregation and terrorism carry the day once again in California, and you're paying for it with your federal subsidies and maybe sending your kids there. Something's got to change. That's about it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 8 p.m. to the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you haven't. And stay tuned for the 5. That's next. Good night from Washington. See you Monday.